basically, I created a quiz called the Body Love Blocker Quiz, which is designed to identify what is most blocking your body confidence at this moment in time. So basically, what is blocking you from loving how your body either feels, function, or how it looks? And so Rose took the quiz and got the perfectionista block. And actually, at this point in time, most of the people that have taken the quiz have gotten the perfectionista block. So that's why I was like, you know, in talking to you about how it's playing out in your life, I thought it would be nice to like do it in a live setting so that other people who are also dealing with perfectionism and perfectionist tendencies, you know, could kind of see like how you could start to work with this. And even if you don't clear it right away, just have more awareness of like, what is this all about? You know, like, why has this been so hard for me to shift? So, so if you want, you can take the quiz if you click the link in my bio, there's a link to the Body Love Blocker quiz. It's just 7 quick questions. And you will find out not only what is blocking you, there's 5 blocks. So the perfectionista is one of the 5. And also you'll get 3 tips to start to clear it. And so, so that link is there. So with that said, and it's funny you talking about burnout. Burnout is one of the other tendencies of one of the other blockers, which is the go-go goddess. So it's interesting you mentioned burnout. So, I mean, you know, we all may have multiple blocks in us. It's just a matter of like what's most dominant at any given time. But as far as the perfectionista block, how do you find that that's playing out in your life right
now? So right now, if I'm being honest, in this present moment, actually, it's really fucking up with my singing practice. And like, that's what's really alive in my body right now. Like, I took 3 months of singing lessons, and like, I'm just really at this point where I am just so frustrated, and I feel like it's like kind of that perfectionista thing, just because it's like I know that there is, like, I know that I'm capable. I know, like, I can just feel it inside of me. It's like, I know that I can fucking do this. I can feel it. I can feel that I can sing in a way that is like nice to the ears. And even just internally, my internal experience of singing, it's like, I can just feel that there's like some kind of block, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. It's like, I can feel it, and I can just feel it in my way. And then I just don't know how to either like get through it or dissolve it. And I just am so frustrated is like what is happening. So it's like I'm having such a hard time being patient, being compassionate, just like being on the journey. And instead, like every single time that I try to practice, I just get frustrated with myself because I'm not already where I know someday I'm going to be. So that's feeling like right now this morning. I'm just so frustrated. Like, why the fuck do I suck at singing still?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like the perfectionista block, like it comes up so much in the forefront when someone is embarking on something new, because it's almost like that part of us, it wants to already be good at it.
Yeah.
So it's like that in-between stage where it's like, I'm learning something and it's, you know, it might be shaky. It might, you know, it might have errors. It might look, you know, chaotic. It might, like the perfectionista in us is so like not at ease with that place. And so, like you said, that in a resistance, that block, you can feel it because it wants to already be good at something. So, you know, I totally can relate to that. And that's just like that's just the nature of that energy, you know. So so the tool that I have found very helpful in terms of like breaking down these habits and patterns and really like seeing like, okay, what is this really all about? Like, why is this so hard? I want to release this thing. Why haven't I? Is this habit mapper tool. And it looks like this. And I got it from drjud.com. So that's drjud.com. If you go there and go to resources, you'll see the link for the habit mapper, but you can also just draw it out on a piece of paper. Did you get to draw it yet, or?
I have it in front of me. Yeah.
Okay, so you already drew the circles and everything?
Yes.
Or we could, okay, perfect. So, so we're gonna start with the top circle. So I know this, if you're looking on the screen, is backwards, but you're just gonna draw a big circle, this is for anyone watching the replay, at the top, and that is gonna be where you're gonna write the behavior. So write the behavior at the top, and then just describe what is it that you want to change. And so this behavior, it can be something physical, like something that your physical body is doing, or it can be something mental. So for example, I filled this out in June, and what I wanted to shift was the habit of worrying and overthinking. So that's nothing to do with my physical body, it's a mental activity. So you can see like what you just described with the singing, describe what you would like to see change in terms of this block and this, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can write it out. Yeah, you can write it out and then you can tell me. Because seeing it on paper, it definitely has an impact. Or we could even like talk it through if you're not sure how to like word it and then write it.
Because like, I guess being in my head, it can be such a fucking nightmare sometimes. Like I get stuck and gridlocked and like chase my own tail like so quick. I guess like what I want to change is like I don't want to react to my progress and my practice with so much frustration and judgment. Like, why do I suck so much? Like, that sounded fucking horrible. Like, why can't I figure out how to like sound better? It's like, well, I guess it would be cool to like not talk to myself like that anymore. When I listen.
Oh, I don't hear you. Oh, okay, came back. So would you say like it's an inner dialogue that you're hearing, almost like an inner critic dialogue as you're trying to practice, or that's like critiquing you after?
Yeah. I think mostly like so very specifically, like if I record myself and then I listen back to the recording, I just like have nothing kind to say to myself. It's just like, fuck, why does this sound like this? Like I don't want it to sound like this. And like that's just where I go emotionally and like self-talk wise whenever I listen to myself practicing singing.
Okay. Okay. So it kind of sounds like what you want to change is like the critical stance that you like, how it's almost like how you're relating to yourself as you practice your singing. It's like a critical stance and critical self-talk.
Yeah.
What it sounds like.
Yeah, because like, so I'll talk to myself like that, and then also like being the receiver of my own self-talk, like I just feel so much like discouragement, and it's just like, am I ever gonna be good? Like, am I practicing wrong? Am I doing this wrong? Like, I guess there's so much fear too. Just like, oh my God, like I'm never gonna get better. Like if I'm bad now, like how am I possibly gonna ever be good? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So does it land for you to say as far as like the behavior you want to change to say like um, critical self-talk and just like a critical stance or something along those lines, like kind of like it's almost like it's critical. It's almost like there's critical eyes on your practice as opposed to maybe like a compassionate one that that would maybe say, you know what, you're learning something new. It's been 3 months, you know, like there's people who have been studying singing for years, like maybe even like from childhood, you know, and this is like something that you just started. And oh hi, I'm not seeing your name, but hi, someone joined. Yeah, so maybe like instead of that critical stance, it would be nice if it was more of a compassionate stance. That's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Constructive, patient.
Right, right. Yeah, so we're just here. We're mapping out the habit that we're trying to release. So we just started mapping out the behavior. So what behavior do you want to change? What, it could be a pattern, it could be a habit, but what do you want to change or release or shift? So that's what we're talking about right now. We just started. So yeah, so I would let's work with that, and then we can always change the wording later, or, you know, but we'll say like critical stance and critical self-talk. That's the behavior that you want to change. And then from there, we're just going to draw an arrow down. And now we're going to go to the results circle. So in the results, this is where we want to ask, what are we getting out of doing this habit or this pattern or this behavior? Because even though it might be something that you want to change and you want to release, the reason why we're still doing these habits is because there's something that we're getting from it, you know? So this question really is going to reveal that. And there's actually 2 parts to this. So it's like, what do you get from it in the short term? You know, like what's the reward you get in the short term? And then what do you get in the long term? And usually the long term is something that is not pleasant and something that you don't want. So for example, I had given the example that the behavior I wanted to shift back in June was worrying and overthinking. And as far as like short-term results, what I was getting out of it initially was I was feeling like I was taking action and doing something, you know. But in the long term, which really was just like a few hours later, I had quite a few negative results from just worrying and overthinking. And so for me, the long-term results, they actually separated in terms of physical and emotional. So physical, I realized that I was getting headaches. I was feeling drained. I also had mental results, mental exhaustion and strain. And then emotionally, the overthinking and the worrying, it was bringing on anxiety. And sometimes it even went to panic. So short term, I felt like, all right, I'm handling things. I'm on top of this by overthinking. I'm doing something about whatever it is I'm worrying about. But long term, I was getting these mental and physical and emotional results that's not what I was going for. You know, that's not what I was going for. So when you think about the results, see if you can pinpoint what's the short term and then, you know, what's the long term, which like I said, it could even be just an hour later, the long term starts kicking in. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind in the short term of like being so hard on myself, I feel like it has to do with some kind of sense of if anyone else heard me sounding so bad by being so hard on myself. It's like I like pre-dump on myself like to protect myself from like other people's judgment. It's like, oh, other people don't have to tell me I'm bad because I've already been so hard on myself. So it's like protecting me from these imagined people like listening to me and like, oh god, this girl sucks. It's like, I know I suck. I told myself first. Like, yeah, I feel like that's going on.
So almost like a protective armor.
Yeah, yeah, like you don't like before anyone can tell me I suck, let me say it to myself first. And as if that's gonna I don't know what good that does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like beating someone to the punch,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what it does, or at least what the psyche is trying to do, is like take the sting off of an imagined future attack that's coming from outside, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So you're not caught off guard. You already prepared yourself for, an imagined critique. That's, because that's pretty common. Like I've seen a lot of people do that in different situations, and it's a form of self-protection, you know. So, all right. So you would say like in the short term, it's like I'm protecting myself from any other outside criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good to write this out, I swear, because it's like you really can see what is happening here, like, okay. And then long term, which like I said, could just be an hour later, what do you think you get from this? It could be mental, it could be physical, it could be emotional. You kind of already said it a little bit when you were talking about the behavior. You talked about frustration, but yeah. So yeah, what are the long-term results?
I feel like long term, it kind of just reinforces a sense of disconnection with myself because, like, so part of why I even want to sing, I just have this desire. Like, I just see it as a practice of self connection. Like, even before we get into like what it sounds like and whether I'm on pitch and la la la, like the root desire driving this like new craft of learning how to sing. It's like I feel like there's a dimension of myself that singing is how I connect with her. And like when I get all distracted with this like inner critic and like self-protective critic, it's like I completely shift my energy and like forget the whole root thing of like this is about me and connecting with me. And I don't give a fuck about what anyone else thinks or like it's not even about anyone else. This is supposed to be my sacred, intimate self-connection practice and like expression. So I guess that's like the long-term thing. It's like it just completely I just keep forgetting like this isn't about anyone else though. This is me.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Okay. Anything else, or you think that um, sums up the results? So like the short term is the self-protection, but the long term is self-disconnection.
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess it's in just another way that I play out like a self abandonment pattern as long as I'm focused on like what other people think of me, like I abandon like being there with and for myself.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Myself again.
So self, yeah. I mean, that's big. I mean, and I feel like that is something I've done, and a lot of people have done that. Like other circles that I've been in, um, where people shared like different things they were going through, self-abandonment comes up a lot, you know. So it's good to be able to name it, you know, that this is what's going on, so that you know, it can be shifted. Okay, so now let's move on to the triggers. So the trigger is right next to results. So we're going to draw an arrow from results to triggers. And so basically, the trigger is basically just asking what starts the behavior? You know, what starts this habit? So we already identified the habit is the critical stance and the critical self-talk. So what is the trigger that starts that? And the trigger could be anything. It could be something that's coming in through your five senses. It could be a place you go to. It could be a thought. It could be an emotion. It could be a physical sensation. So in my example, with the worrying and the overthinking, I realized that what triggers that is actually thoughts in my head. So when I have a thought in my head that something needs to get done, or I have a thought that I'm uncertain about something, those two things will set off the worrying and overthinking. So for me, it was thoughts that triggered it. But it can be anything coming through your senses, physical sensations.
Mm.
I know this one took me a while to figure it out too, like what starts it.
Yeah, because like for me right now, I there's still like some rigidity and like judgment layered into like what I'm thinking of the triggers. Like, well, the trigger is that I sound horrible when I sing. It's like I don't feel like that's not it. I feel like the trigger must be something like
Well,
different than like hearing myself sing.
could the trigger be, well in this example, you were saying like when you listen back to, you know, one of your practices, you know. So I mean, it could be that, or it could just be overall, you know. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, for this example, it sounds like it's that, like when you are listening back to your singing practice session,
I
that's
maybe it's like that when I listen, like I'm listening hoping that I'm like sounding a specific way rather than listening to just what does it sound like? So maybe like the fact that I come into listening that like, oh, I hope I finally fucking sound like Ariana Grande this time rather than let's just see where I'm at today.
mm. Okay, so I'm kind of hearing two things. I'm kind of hearing like listening with expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So listening back to your practice with an expectation of what it should sound like. So maybe it's like, it's, it could be like shoulds, like having shoulds, like I should be further along than I am. I should sound like this by now. It should be, you know, like there's some shoulds in there. And so when the reality isn't matching the should, maybe that's what triggers the self-talk. But then I almost feel like, okay, I was going to say, I almost feel like even before that, there's a stance that precedes, because in order to have the should, there needs to be like, there's a judgmental stance already there that has these shoulds in place. And then when you listen to it, it's checking to see, is it matching up with those shoulds? So maybe like a combination of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think, maybe then even like a step further back, even before I go to like listen to my singing, like when I go into a practice with this like mental checklist of like all the different like things that I'm supposed to be keeping in mind. And again, like even having a checklist there instead of just a curiosity of like, I get to practice exploring and connecting with my body through my voice and singing. And so even the way that I come into the practice, there's like a difference of like, oh, I'm doing this to like check off these boxes that it takes to like be a good singer. Like even then, so like the setup is there, and then when I go to listen, like that's where it all like gets, yeah, like oriented out, and like again for some kind of like imaginary judgmental audience.
Right, yeah. So you're saying even before you start the singing session, there's a part of you that's like, I'm doing this to accomplish this, or to be at this singing level, rather than I'm doing this to connect with that deeper part of myself and just have fun with the process and let it unfold how it unfolds. It's like even at that part, there's a, I don't know what to call it, but like there's like a manager that's like managing the situation as opposed to just like letting it play out how it plays out.
Yeah, yeah. Like if I'm gonna be a good singer, then like soft palate and breath and pitch and blah 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 blah, rather than just I am going to stay. I mean, there are like still some like there's a way that the checklist is helpful because it helps me get into my body for sure. And then there's like a line where it tips over into like yeah, not being guiding and grounding anymore. And then it becomes again like, oh, these conditions and these shoulds, and like make sure to check off this box because that's the only way that I'm gonna be a beautiful singer and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of layers here. So okay, so were you able to capture down the triggers? Okay. And then there's an arrow that goes from the trigger to the behavior. So there's 3 arrows in between each of the circles. Okay, so does anything jump out at you so far? Like any ahas, or based on writing this out and seeing it on paper?
I think, yeah, just like that realization of like I just didn't realize until we were talking about this out loud that like my motivation is so much I just want to have this like inner connection and exploration and play with myself. And yeah, I just didn't realize there's like that, and that I totally get out of that all the time when I like go to practice. It's like, oh duh. It's because I don't maintain that mindset of connection and exploration. Duh.
Right. Yeah. So part of the beauty of writing this out and seeing everything on paper is that you could see like all the moving parts, and actually each part feeds into the next. So this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to break a habit that you actually want to break. Like, it's not that you don't want to break it. It's not that you're not trying. It's not that you're weak. It's just that there's these moving parts, and the habit itself self-fuels. So when I saw this for myself, I didn't realize that the long result that I was getting, such as the headaches and the anxiety and the panic, that was actually making me get triggered. So whereas I thought the process was starting with the trigger and then leading to the behavior of worrying and overthinking, the result of the headaches, the panic, the anxiety was actually starting the trigger, because then I had to do something about the anxiety, or I had to do something about, now I have this headache. How am I going to train my clients, or how am I going to get through my to-do list? And I feel drained. So now I had to do something about that. So then that started the worrying and the overthinking. So it just, like, it becomes like a spiral that is just running. And depending on how long we've been doing these habits, it could be months, years, decades. Like, this pathway is just like in our nervous system running on its own. So when we now want to do something new, we have to come against, this is like a system, you know, but it's like, once you see it, once you can like have some distance from it and you can see it, if you can just break one part of this 3-part system, you weaken the habit, you know. And, you know, for some people, just seeing it laid out like this could be enough to like start that shift. For others, it may take some time to like, okay, now I see what's happening. It's almost like your brain, something that Dr. Judd said is that in order to release a habit, you have to get to a place where you become disenchanted with it, you know. So even though you might be getting the short-term result, once you could see, but damn, I'm getting all these other things that's not what I was trying to do, that you actually feel disenchanted with it. So it's like, once you get to that place, it changes the dynamic. It changes how you relate to it, because you realize that not just intellectually, but you could feel that shift of disenchantment where you're like, you know what, this is not it. Like, this is not what I was going for. I wasn't trying to get all these other, you know, results. And I want something else for my life, you know? So, how is this landing for you?
Yes, I am feeling like I've like stepped back enough to like find that entry point into like, oh, I can totally shift this energy in this way, and it'll start like undermining that cycle and like taking the energy away from it. And definitely disenchantment, I very much resonate with that as a really powerful, effective, um, I don't know, like energy or feeling, because that does seem to be the only way that I have been able to release kind of more draining patterns. Like, I just have to be bored with it. Like, I can't like muscle my way out of it or anything. I really just have to like run it and be present and like let it go through its process to the point where like, yeah, it just starts like getting boring, like disenchanting. Like, I'm just kind of like fucking over this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I almost could hear it in your voice when you were talking about the long results, and you were saying how your whole intention of singing was to tap into this deeper part of yourself and, you know, water that connection. And this critical voice is actually undermining that. And I could kind of hear like this wistfulness in your voice to speak that out loud. And I feel like if you can maybe even like if it starts right before you even start the singing practice, if that's where you could play around with it, like how can you shift that stance to remind yourself why you're doing this? Like it's not about being this great, recording artist, singer. It's not about performance. It's about connection. This is not a performance-based practice. It's about connection. So I don't know if it's saying a mantra before you start the practice or having like something visual, or it could even be just having this up on the wall. Like I have this where I can see it. It's on my nightstand to remind me. You remember what happened when you worry and overthink? You know what's gonna happen. You're gonna get a headache. You're gonna get anxiety. How's that gonna help? So it's like something to like remind you of what your true intention is. And you could play around with it, see how things shift now that you have distance from it and you've mapped out the structure of this habit, and yeah, like see how it shifts from there.
Yeah, that's gonna take some time because that's one of those things. Like, I know that if I try like thinking of something right now, like it's gonna be that thing where it's gonna come from my ego. And again, it's gonna be that
Mm-hmm.
same, I should be able to do this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and because I'm like pressuring myself or like thinking like it should be that neat and tidy. And then I just have to like will my way into doing things that's like nice, perfect way. So I'm gonna have to sit on this and really like kind of wait for how my energy body opens up to this and what my feelings respond to, and like find my organic way into like, okay, how do I use this information to like shift how I come into my singing practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like let it marinate, you know, and see. But yeah, like the awareness of it, I think is so powerful. To see all the moving parts and just yeah, see what births from that.
Yes, and yeah, it really does make a difference to like be able to talk through it out loud and like write it through your body, because it's just like, oh my God. Like, even if I feel like in a like certain level, like mentally, I was aware that so what I want is to have this like experience and practice of connection. And then like over here separate, like I was getting frustrated with that inner critic. And it's only like right now through like talking through it with you and like filling out the thing that I started to see like, oh, this disconnect is happening. Duh.
Yeah. And the beauty of that is once you see something, you can't unsee it. So now you see it, and now it'll be interesting to see like what comes out, how things shift from there,
Yeah.
because sometimes, like I said, just seeing it is enough to start unraveling this thing where it's like you could finally like make traction with it.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. That's so good. And so as far as yeah, next steps, just let me know. Like, let me know if anything shifts for you. Like, I don't know. It could take however long it takes, because like I was saying, depending on how long you've been doing something, it might not just shift overnight, but at least how you relate to it, and at least you can spot it and you can clearly see what's happening. And then it's also like, now why it's been so hard to release it, so definitely let me know how this process unfolds. And yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you wanna chat about before kind of switch gears?
No, I feel pretty like, yeah, I feel very well landed. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So anybody that watches this replay, I would love if you would let me know if anything has shifted with this habit that you mapped out, or if you've been able to release it. I'll be curious to know how it works for you. And you could just send me a DM and let me know. And yeah, so before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance, Rose, to let people know what you're up to as far as your creative works and how people can check it out.
Yes, thank you. So I am a priestess, artist, coach. I have a signature method for doing inner alchemy called How to Ride Your Dragon. And it's basically just if you experienced abuse as a child and you have an abandonment wound, like I have these like somatic alchemy steps, phases that help you become aware of where those internalized abusive figures are still like operating in your head, and how you can authentically like release them and be connected to your inner guidance and really restore that authority to your inner guidance of like, oh my God, this is what my true authentic voice is saying, and I can trust it, I can listen to that, I can surrender to the authority of that. Like I do not honor the authority anymore of any of these external figures or conditions outside of me. Like I am the creatrix of my reality, and I'm committing to the reality that I love to live in. So I'm playing with right now. If you want to learn more about it, you can check out my Substack. I have a private series where I'm literally just sharing my voice notes for like, okay, this is how I use my method to coach myself right now through this experience of like, oh, I've done fell in love again with somebody who is activating my abandonment wound. And it really is like this amazing journey into the unknown, because like you don't realize how much of the voices inside you are still like clinging to those like maladaptive coping mechanisms of like trying to control. It's like, oh no, this is like, you've got to step back even more. You got to surrender even more. Like, oh girl, you don't know how much is going to change as you really allow your ego to like get out of the driver's seat, and you're letting your heart take the driver's seat, and you're learning just like a whole different way to relate to yourself and reality. Like it is so beyond just trying to like, I want things to go this way. How do I like manipulate like manifestation positive thoughts to like make things go my way? It's like, oh no, it's like a completely different relationship to reality, and like a completely different embodying of like faith and belief in yourself and trust in your desires, and then still honoring this wild reality where it's like everyone still gets to say no. Like you're healing your abandonment wound doesn't mean that you finally get to have a life where like no one says no to you anymore. So just like things like that. So that's on my private Substack, because there's a lot of it that has to do with like healing sexual trauma and like getting back into like the sexy, spicy, erotic energy and magic of life. So like this is just a paid private thing, because like we're getting into it. This is fucking girl talk, okay? Yeah, so if you want to, like if anyone wants to check that out, that's what I have going on right now.
And they can get to your Substack from
My
your
Instagram,
IG,
yeah, there's a
from
link
your
in
IG page.
bio. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that sounds so juicy, you know. And it's so funny because as you were talking about getting to the place where like your heart is leading as opposed to like, you know, the voice. It's so funny because if you're not used to doing that, that seems so scary. And it's funny, it almost seems unsafe because it's unknown. Like you don't know where your heart is going to lead you. You don't know where your soul is going to lead you. It's unknown. And as soon as something is unknown and uncertain, the brain is like, danger, you
Yeah,
know? And like those patterns kick in, the self-protection, so it's wild.
it is.
Like you say yes to, and surrender to that, to living that way. It's wild, but I must say, anytime I've done that, my heart and my soul never steers me wrong. And I'm not going to say like, okay, I didn't experience like uncomfortable feelings or whatever, but it was like I survived it, you know, like I was able to navigate it, you know. So it seems scary to our brain and to our patterns, but our body is not going to steer us wrong. So it's just getting to that place, and maybe it's baby steps, you know, maybe it's, you know, listen to like the smaller nudges that your heart is giving you is, instead of like the bigger, you know, just like kind of titrate it to test it out and see, you know, like what happens if I just let my heart lead, you know. But it's exciting. I think it's exciting though.
Yes, and definitely like what you said with like starting smaller, like especially because it is so scary and it like steps you into the unknown. Like I know that Virgo season just ended, but like that is major Virgo, like, and also Isis. I talk a lot about my spiritual relationship with Isis, like the Egyptian deity. And like that is very, very consistent guidance ever since I really like started this journey and like experimenting on myself. Like softer, smaller, slower, like part of what we need to decondition and like what like I know was blocking me on my journey. Again, like I had this like expectation and image in my head of like, okay, well, if I'm going to start following my heart, then it needs to like look like this and this. It's like, no, you're still making it too hard again. You're doing too much. You can like really like as gently and lovingly and like this can be so soft and small and simple. And like part of the healing is like giving ourselves permission to move that way instead of this like really like pressure overachieving, like fast paced kind of like world that we have been growing up in. And we're already seeing the limits of like, this isn't working. We got to move different.
Yeah, it's like baby steps, you know, baby steps. So that way you can show your brain evidence that, look, we followed our heart for this little small little thing and we're fine.
Yeah.
Like nothing crazy happened, you know. And then little by little, it's like you building that trust. It's almost like you're building trust with that part of yourself that we don't really know because we've been just living through our mind and our egos. Like we've been letting our mind and egos lead, and so we don't know what it's like for our heart to lead. So yeah, I love that. Okay, well, this was great. As always, I love our juicy conversations.
Me too.
And yes, so I hope you give yourself a lot of self-care for that burnout situation. That is not fun. Like I was dealing with that over the summer, and I had to completely overhaul things because my energy was just like, we can't move at the pace you've been moving at. So I totally understand how that is. So, but I know you're tapped in, so
yeah,
you will.
I'm gonna go have a salt bath like right now.
Awesome. All right, Rose. So I will talk to you soon. Hopefully I can figure out how to save this thing.
Yeah. I hope it'll be pretty straightforward. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. You look so beautiful.
Thank
Just like
you.
really Asian vibes today. So yes, I hope you have a beautiful Venus day.
Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.